October 7th, 2001. What does it feel like to kneel in the dirt of a foreign land while bullets snap inches above your head? Knowing that if your hands shake for even 1 second, the man bleeding out in front of you will die, and you will carry that weight forever? On that autumn night, as U.S. aircraft struck Taliban and Al-Qaeda targets to begin Operation Enduring Freedom, the Afghanistan War opened a chapter that would stretch nearly 20 years. From October 7, 2001 to August 30, 2021, becoming America's longest war and one of its most psychologically brutal. A conflict defined not only by massive battles, but by classified missions carried out in pitch darkness, in frozen mountain passes, in mud-walled villages where danger breathed from every doorway. And nowhere was that danger more intimate than for combat medics operating under fire. Men and women trained to run toward screams while everyone else instinctively sought cover. Because from the earliest days after 9/11, when CIA paramilitary teams and Army Special Forces linked up with the Northern Alliance, medics were embedded deep behind enemy lines, treating gunshot wounds and blast injuries with limited supplies while enemy fighters closed in. And during the opening months in late 2001, places like Mazar-i-Sharif and Tora Bora saw chaotic fighting where medics worked by headlamp light, fingers slick with blood, the smell of cordite and burned metal mixing with cold mountain air, knowing evacuation could be hours or days away if weather grounded helicopters. And as the war shifted into a grinding counterinsurgency after the Taliban regime fell in December 2001, the role of medics became even more harrowing. Because from 2003 onward, as insurgent attacks increased, roadside bombs and ambushes turned routine patrols into sudden nightmares, with the deadliest weapon being the improvised explosive device, or IED, which by 2006 and 2007 was tearing apart Humvees and MRAPs across provinces like Helmand, Kandahar, and Kunar, leaving medics to crawl into twisted wreckage under fire, sometimes finding friends still alive but trapped, screaming, sometimes finding silence and the kind of damage no amount of training could undo. And during Operation Red Wings in June 2005, when a Navy SEAL reconnaissance team was compromised in the mountains of Kunar province, the subsequent firefight and the shoot-down of a Chinook helicopter killed 19 Americans in a single day, including 16 SEALs and Special Operations aviators. And medics on the ground and at forward bases faced a kind of horror that lingers in memory, treating catastrophic wounds while knowing that help had fallen from the sky in flames. And by the time the war surged in 2009 under President Obama, with tens of thousands of additional U.S. troops deploying, medics were operating in environments where the line between civilian and combatant was dangerously thin, where a child could trigger an explosive or a farmer could pull a weapon from beneath his robes. And medics often treated Afghan civilians injured in crossfire or by insurgent bombs, including women and children, a moral weight that compounded the stress. Because saving a life one moment did not guarantee safety the next. And in districts like Sangin, often called the most dangerous place in Afghanistan around 2010, firefights were so frequent that medics sometimes joked grimly about memorizing the sound of different weapons, the crack of an AK-47 versus the deeper thump of an RPG, because that knowledge bought seconds, and seconds saved lives. And the horror did not always announce itself with noise, as night raids conducted by Special Operations Forces meant medics treated wounds in total darkness, suppressing pain cries to avoid detection, applying tourniquets while listening to insurgents moving outside, whispering prayers or final messages into radios in case the perimeter collapsed. And one of the most haunting realities of the war was that despite advances in battlefield medicine, despite faster evacuation times and improved armor, the injuries grew more complex, with blast trauma causing invisible damage, traumatic brain injuries that left soldiers conscious but confused, eyes wide with fear as they asked the same question again and again. And medics had to make impossible calls: who could be saved, who could not. Decisions that replayed in dreams long after deployment ended. And by the mid-2010s, as U.S. forces shifted toward advising Afghan national security forces, medics found themselves treating Afghan soldiers in remote outposts, often under-resourced, facing determined Taliban assaults like those seen in Kunduz in 2015, where the city briefly fell and chaotic fighting erupted street by street, and medics worked amid collapsing morale, sometimes treating men who knew their families might be targeted if they survived. And throughout the war, classified missions continued in the shadows, targeting high-value insurgent leaders. Missions that rarely made headlines but demanded extreme endurance, long insertions on foot at high altitude, minimal sleep, constant threat of betrayal. And when things went wrong, medics were again at the center, stabilizing wounded operators while exfiltration plans changed by the minute. And the horror peaked not only in combat, but in aftermaths. The quiet moments after firefights when medics checked pulses in the dust, wrote times of death on casualty cards, and sat beside bodies waiting for evacuation, staring into Afghan night skies that felt impossibly calm compared to the chaos on the ground. And as years passed, tours repeated, with some medics deploying 4, 5, even 6 times, carrying accumulated trauma as the war dragged on with no clear end. And then in 2021, as the U.S. withdrawal accelerated and Taliban forces advanced rapidly, the war's final chapter unfolded in scenes of panic and desperation, culminating at Hamid Karzai International Airport in Kabul in August 2021, where medics once again treated wounded under threat, most tragically after the August 26, 2021 suicide bombing that killed 13 U.S. service members and over 100 Afghan civilians, an attack that echoed every fear medics had lived with for 2 decades, that even in the final hours, even in supposed safety, death could arrive without warning. And when the last U.S. aircraft departed on August 30, 2021, the Afghanistan War ended not with triumph, but with unresolved questions, with veterans carrying memories of bravery and horror intertwined, especially those medics who ran into gunfire armed not with weapons, but with bandages, needles, and sheer will. And now, years later, as we look back on the classified missions, the firefights in mountain valleys, the blood-soaked dust of patrol routes, and the quiet heroism of those who saved lives under fire, the question remains, one that should haunt and challenge us enough to make us speak up, argue, and remember. After 20 years of sacrifice, fear, and courage beyond imagination, did the world truly understand what these medics endured in Afghanistan? Or have the most terrifying and heroic moments of the war been left buried in silence, waiting for us to confront them?